We have had 446,000 COVID deaths in the United States as of January 2021. Estimates are we will wind up with between 500 and 600,000 deaths. To try to reduce COVID deaths, our governors and health officials have taken a lockdown approach that we are all familiar with, which included stay-at-home orders, closing schools, closing churches, closing restaurants and bars, and mandatory mask wearing in public. Presumably that has reduced COVID deaths. We hope so. We at COVID Sanity estimate it may have prevented 200,000 COVID deaths by the time we are all vaccinated and this is over with. The most it could have prevented is about double that, or 400,000 deaths, because with 400,000 COVID deaths on top of the 550,000 or so that we are going to have, we would have 950,000 COVID deaths, and that would require over 70% of the population to have been infected, and we would be at herd immunity at that point. But we think the lockdowns may have prevented 200,000 COVID deaths. The average person dying of COVID has about 4 years of life expectancy remaining, so that would save 800,000 person years of life. That would be great. But the point of all this was to isolate us from each other so we would not be able to transmit COVID to each other. Unfortunately, we are a social species, so that makes us unhappy and increases depression. The lockdowns have tripled depression, in fact, and thrown 19.3% of the population into major clinical depression, or 63 million people. That's 316 people thrown into major depression by the lockdowns for every one person the lockdowns are saving from COVID. Depression can be considered lost time of life, and the average depression episode lasts 20 weeks. So that works out to 24 million person years of life lost to time spent in major depression caused by the lockdowns, or 30 times the person years of life saved in prevented COVID deaths. Okay, that's bad, but maybe you don't care about happiness and depression and quality of life. Maybe all you care about is duration of life. The lockdowns at least extended our lives, right? Well, actually, all that depression and unhappiness leads to suicides, as well as drug and alcohol abuse deaths. So while the lockdowns save lives by preventing COVID deaths, they kill other people by driving them to suicide. How many? Well, the government tells us literally every day how many people died of COVID the previous day, but they still have not told us, even for 2019, over a year ago, how many people died of suicide or drug overdoses. So we don't really know. Apparently the government doesn't care about suicides as much as it cares about COVID deaths. But we know the lockdowns are increasing suicides. If they increase them by just 22% for 2 years, and keep in mind the depression has increased by more than 200%, so it seems a pretty safe bet that suicides and drug overdoses will increase by 22%. The suicides and drug overdoses caused by the lockdowns will kill 68,000 people and result in 2.54 million person years of life lost. That's more than 3 times the person years of life saved in prevented COVID deaths. So in addition to causing unemployment, depression, and lost quality of life from giving up so many things we enjoy for the past year, there is really no doubt that the lockdowns will cause more loss of life from suicides than they will save in prevented COVID deaths. We estimate 3 times the loss of life, and we are probably underestimating it.